Well, hello, it's Andrew again, and we're continuing in our little series as we work our way through Matthew's Gospel. Today is episode 52, and today we're picking up the parable of the weeds, or as it used to be known as the parable of the tares. We had that a few days ago, and we looked at it just simply from a personal point of view. We pretended that we'd never heard it before and considered what it might be like to hear it for the first time and how it impacted each of us personally. Well, we've had a couple of days between then, and now we're picking up Jesus' interpretation, because he gave the parable, then he gave a couple of others. He talked a little bit more about parables, and we've spent the last 2 days looking at those. And now we're back to Jesus' explanation of this particular parable. So we pick the narrative up in chapter 13 in verse 36. Then Jesus left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples approached him, saying, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field." He answered, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers. And they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen." As I say, we've looked at this from a personal point of view, and I think having just a couple of days break is actually useful, so we can come to it with fresh eyes again this morning. So we find that in this kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of the evil one exists. It coexists right alongside it. And here's the thing, it looks very much like the kingdom of heaven. It's very hard to tell the difference. One of the things that we know about the evil one is he's a very good imitator. And so there are subtle differences, but they have to be spotted. And so we have this picture of these two that are coexisting. In fact, they're so intricately entwined that to pull up the weed would be to pull up the wheat. Now, I know that I've looked at this, and apparently the darnel, the tares, the weed that's been spoken of here, has deeper roots than the wheat, and they entwine them. So that if you pull up the weed, you cannot help but pulling up the wheat as well. And for Jesus, this doesn't seem a problem, as we talked about last week. We just let them last week. We let them just grow along together. Right. And the thing is that what it seems to me is that we find that the kingdom of the evil one, it coexists right alongside the kingdom of heaven, and we know it in ourselves. It's sown right among us. We know it at a personal level, but we also know it at a wider church level. It seems to me it's why we partition ourselves off from people who see differently from us. Even within the church, we judge those who worship differently, who vary in their doctrines, who are more liberal or more conservative than we are. We almost automatically conclude that they are wrong, simply because we know that we are right. I used to have a poster on my wall in my previous life as a government servant. I worked as a quantity surveyor for the Ministry Works for 13 years. And the poster said, "Those of you who think you know everything are annoying to those of us who do." And people thought I was joking. Well, things happen, don't they? And we do. We are sure that we are right. We are sure that in the end, it's a simple binary choice. You either choose this or you choose that. And this is right because this is the way that I see, and that is wrong because it's not the way that I see. And so we see everyone who comes over from them to us, from that side to our side, is good and appropriate. And if we can attract them, and this is what we do as churches, if we can winkle them away from where they are, is that not a good thing? And although some would even admit it, we're actually in the process of rescuing people. We're rescuing them from false beliefs. We're rescuing them from false ways of engaging with God or understanding with God or engaging with the Holy Spirit. We are in a rescue mission here to get those people out of where they are into where we are, which is obviously the place where we need to be. I saw a Twitter quote yesterday. It goes back actually into 2019. It's from a black American church leader, and it struck a chord with me. Now, it will also likely highly offend some of you who are watching this. It tells you which part of both the ecclesiastical church and political spectrum that I currently occupy. Now, this doesn't mean that I'll be there forever, because I wasn't there at one time in the past. But here's the quote. This is from a Bishop Talbot Swan. Calling a black POTUS, now if you know the acrostics in the American system, POTUS is the President of the United States. Calling a black POTUS, married 25 years to one wife with 2 children, no mistresses, affairs or scandals, the Antichrist. But a white POTUS, married thrice, 5 kids, both 3 women, mistresses, affairs and scandals, God's anointed, proves your religion is white supremacy. And I thought, it looks a little bit difficult to argue with in the end. But each group is quite sure that we're right and the other one are wrong. That we are in fact God's anointed and the other in fact are the spawn of Satan. We're expert at demonizing those who vary from us, sometimes even over the smallest of variances, which we consider at the time to be of crucial importance. Clearly those others are the tares sown by the devil. Look up your favourite, I just invite you to look up your favourite famous preacher. Look them up on Google and go a few pages in on the internet, and you'll invariably find those who are sure that this person whom you think is right on the money is the spawn of hell. Guaranteed. I remember reading some years ago A.W. Tozer. He was a great preacher. He died in the early 60s. He was discussing the effect of temperament. He was actually speculating on our religious inclinations. Serious or sober people seem to be more inclined towards Calvinism, the idea that God has once and for all chosen those who will be saved, and at the same time chosen those who will be damned to an eternity of hell. Alternatively, there are those more inclined towards Arminianism, that the gospel is to whomsoever will. Well, I went and had a look and I found the article, and I just want to quote a little bit of him. While it is true that Jacob Arminius was a Dutchman, on the whole the Dutch people appear temperamentally quite suited to Calvinism. On the other hand, it would be hard to imagine a Calvinistic Spaniard or Italian. Isolated instances there certainly are, but for the most part the buoyant, volatile, mandolin-playing Latin does not take naturally to long periods of meditation on the divine sovereignty and the eternal decrees. Now, this was written, I suspect, in the 1950s. And I'm sure this would have rung true then. It's interesting because I've been thinking about this. Much has changed for the Dutch since then. Since then, the North Sea gas has been discovered. What was once a poor nation has now become quite wealthy. And if you've been to the Netherlands, you'll see that it's quite an open and an ebullient kind of place. It's not the dour sort of place that you'd imagine. Now, I know the Dutch because I'm of Dutch heritage and I have Dutch relatives and I know how they can become. Interesting. So, things change. But he would have been right on the money, I think, at the time he wrote. To quote him further, people may be classified roughly into 2 psychological types. The gay, and you can obviously see that it was written in a different era, and the sombre. And it is easy to see how each type will be attracted to doctrinal views that agree most naturally with its own mental cast. The Calvinist, for instance, never permits himself to become too happy, while the Arminian never tends to equate gravity of disposition with coldness of heart and tries to cure it with a revival. No Calvinist could have written the radiant hymns of Bernard of Clairvaux or Charles Wesley. Calvinism never produced a Christian mystic, unless we accept John Calvin, who was near to being a mystic and did write a few hymns almost as radiant as those of Bernard. To square the records, however, it should be said that if the Calvinist does not rise as high, he usually stays up longer. He places more emphasis on the Holy Scriptures, which never change, while his opposite number, as newspapers say, tends to judge his spiritual condition by the state of his feelings, which change constantly. This may be the reason that so many Calvinistic churches remain orthodox for centuries, at least in doctrine, while many churches of the Arminian persuasion often go liberal in one generation. I realise that I'm doing a bit of oversimplifying on my own here. Still, I believe there is a germ of truth in the whole thing. And I think he's right. It's kind of interesting. Can you imagine Calvinism thriving in Jamaica? Seriously? No, it just doesn't fit. Or can you imagine Arminianism thriving in the harsh Danish environment portrayed in the 1987 movie Babette's Feast? If you haven't seen it, go and look at it. There's no way you think, no, it just doesn't fit. It's worth thinking about, even just a little. And we have room to move. I look back over the course of my life and see a huge shift. My understanding has changed. My awareness of God and my encounter with God has changed. I see more. I understand more. I embrace more. In the eyes of many, I'm clearly a heretic, whereas I might have started in a much more Calvinistic place. I know I'm not. For me, it raises a simple question. What kind of God is this that you think you worship? And I think it's a question that you need to answer for yourself. I've answered it and have come into a different place. I can no longer live there. I'm obviously a weed, a tear, and this may be the case. It should perhaps bother me more than it actually does, or more than it might have at one time. And this is the question I want to leave you with. Do you ever have the sneaking suspicion that Jesus is talking about you? That you are one of the weeds, that you are one of the tears? I do. Not that he's talking about you necessarily, but that he's talking about me. When he mentions the tears, the wheats, the ones that look like the real deal but aren't, that he might be talking about me. I'm the one who's the fraud. Yeah, I feel like a fraud a good bit of the time. Identify with the disciples when told by Jesus in the upper room on the night that he was betrayed that one of them was going to be responsible for his betrayal, and they all ask him, surely not me, Lord. They all, each one of them, they know that within themselves there is this tendency. They know that they haven't got their act together. They know that there isn't a 100% commitment and certainty and sureness and solidity within them. They've got this variability. They all know it. Perhaps it's time then we stop looking for the faults in others, the points of departure on the differences between us, and ask the same question, is it me? Surely not me, Lord. It's uncomfortable, I know. But I have to consider the possibility that it could be me. I can do an inventory of my life and ask what fruitfulness I see. Am I poisonous like the tears? Or has the fruit been life-giving to me and to others? I'm not sure that I'm the best person to judge. It's a useful question to ask. One of the reasons that it's all sorted at the harvest is that it allows the maximum possible time for change. It's only at the harvest that the truth is ultimately known, and not before. It bears some thinking about. It bears some opening of our hearts before God. God bless you.